Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Tuesday, August 27th City Council meeting and call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, before we have public comment, unfortunately, we need to have some moments of silence for three community members that have passed. Fran Carey, Ken Campbell, and Barbara Grant. So if everyone could join me in moments of silence, please. Thank you. Okay, so we'll start off the meeting with public comment. And if there's anyone in the audience that would like to make public comment, if you would raise your hand when you get up to the big stand there, please state your name and mailing address. Keep it under 3 minutes and remember to be kind and respectful in your comments. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make public comment?
About a particular issue that's coming up on the agenda or just in general?
We first just do general ones, and then when we have the public hearings, we'll have specific ones. Thanks. Anyone in the audience? Okay, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to make public comments?
Yeah.
If you would raise your hand.
Mark Charlesworth. You know that?
No.
Hello.
Good evening, Mark.
Oh, good evening. Thank you. So public comment, my mailing address is not my residence, but my residence is 144 Brillier. I have a
Do you have a post office box? Mailing address?
No, I don't have a post office box. I'm a registered voter in Cannon Beach and I live in Cannon Beach, but I guess I really shouldn't have given my residence address, but I use a different address for my mail where my assistant opens my mail. So
okay,
I don't feel it necessary to have a post office box.
Okay.
And is that required?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I have some confusion about the public parking strip in front of the Surfcrest Pizza and Market, which is also a post office, ironically, per that last issue, next to Sea Level Coffee. I'm not really clear on what is happening there with the parking through the rest of Cannon Beach. We have there's a line that runs along the side of the road, and to the right of it, cars park. But at that particular location, the owner of the business allows people to park as long as they like if they shop at that store, and 5 minutes if they don't. And they also get to occupy the parking strip with benches, signs, and other items that doesn't seem to be the tradition in the rest of Cannon Beach. So I noticed that the lot line on the GIS system does extend into the street, yet the city has paved the street and the parking strip. So I'm not really sure what the issue is or where to take the issue. I talked to code enforcement about it and there wasn't a great deal of clarity on the issue. But I don't know how to bring this to the council and say, do we have a 5-minute parking here? I noticed in front of the post office in downtown, there are different parking limits, but in front of the Surfcrest Market, there isn't.
Okay, our police chief is here and listening closely, and we'll do some research. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Anyone else on Zoom? Okay, one more time for the audience. Anybody? Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so we're going to start off tonight with a public hearing, and it's the agenda item is application 2405. This is a public hearing regarding appeal of Design Review Board's denial of DRB 2413 CETA Incorporated applicant on behalf of the city of Cannon Beach for the placement of temporary city hall and stations. Subject property is located at the eastern terminus of East 2nd Street, tax lot 201, map 51020 CC zone. The application will be reviewed against the criteria of Municipal Code, Chapter 17.44.080 through 17.44100 design review criteria. I'm going to open the public hearing, and does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the city council to hear the appeal at this time? Does any council believe he or she has a personal bias to declare? Does any counselor believe he or she has a conflict of interest? Has any counselor had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit?
Right, visit.
Site visit? Is there any additional correspondence?
Nothing was received.
Okay, so I'd like the staff report, please. Good evening, Steve.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. What we're taking a look at tonight is the temporary city hall and police station at the eastern end of East Second Street. At their June 20th meeting, the Design Review Board elected to deny certain portions of the application that was submitted to them on behalf of, from CETA on behalf of the city for the placement of the temporary city hall and police station at the eastern terminus of East Second Street. The city requested review of that decision, and on July 16th, the council held a scope of review and decided that the matter would be held on the record. The proposed project is the placement of two temporary structures, the House Cannon Beach City Hall and Police Station. During the construction of the permanent facilities, the city proposes to place the facility owned on the city-owned parcel at East Second Street adjacent to the sewage treatment lagoons and the recycle center. The structures will be placed prior to demolition of the existing city hall on Gower Street and removed after the replacement of city hall and police station buildings are completed. The DRB found that the site plan did not satisfy the approval criteria because of parking concerns. Council should be aware that staff stated the following concerning the parking related to the proposed use. And that basically is the specific parking requirements, which is basically for retail and office use. The requirement is 400 for every 400 square feet of building. One parking space. The building was 3,600 square feet, the two together. And so there was a total of 9 spaces required. That requirement was satisfied by the provision of 6 parking spaces immediately adjacent to the structure. Then an additional 12 to 15 spaces in the gravel parking area immediately west of where the temporary facilities will be placed. As staff did at the Design Review Board meeting, we're recommending that the council reverse this decision and approve the criteria. Approve the buildings. We believe that the structures are meeting the parking requirements and the site plan criteria have been met. And so staff is recommending council approve that and direct staff to draft findings for the mayor to sign.
Ask a question. So, at least from what I'm reading here, the people on the Design Review Board who denied this project made up their own criteria
I believe,
and then denied it based on this criteria that they invented themselves.
I believe they thought they were utilizing the criteria. I'm not saying that it was correct. I'm not saying, it's hard for me to speak to that. I don't know they believe that they were trying to use the site plan criteria when making their decision.
But the parking criteria is met.
I agree with you 100%.
So can we have the public hearing and then have our discussion?
Okay.
That's okay. Anybody else have any immediate questions? Okay, so we're gonna call for public testimony and state the appeal will be reviewed against the criteria of Municipal Code Chapter 17.44080 through 17.44.100 Design Review Criteria. The hearing will be held on the record and no new evidence will be allowed into record. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. In addition, failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the mayor, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Testimony is limited to matters which were raised by the design review board hearing in writing or orally. Is there a presentation by the appellant? Hi, Leslie.
Thank you. My name is Leslie Jones. I am here as a representative of CETA Architects and Engineers, representing the city. Mailing address 15895 Southwest 72nd, 100 in Portland. We believe that we have addressed in the documents in your packet the required site design criteria. We have gone through the municipal code section 17.44080 and believe that the project is meeting all of those criteria. I'm here primarily to answer questions as they arise.
Okay, thank you. Are there presentations by proponents? Are there presentations by opponents? Is there a staff response?
The staff is responsive that we're recommending approval and that we'd like to have council have staff draft those findings and have the mayor sign those.
Okay, does the appellant or proponents wish to make additional statements? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing and move to consideration. Ask away, Lisa.
Well, no, that was my,
Did you get? your
that was
answer?
that was my
Okay.
question. I just don't. Well,
I have a question. Is there any requirement, Steve, to replace parking that might be removed because of the temporary buildings?
The question comes down to that is parking that is on the wastewater and recycle center. It's not, say, for example, a quote unquote city parking lot. And based on that and the temporary nature was that the only requirement that the city needed to meet was to make sure that we had enough parking on that lot to make sure there was enough for our uses, and that has been done. I think there was some question and discussion to the fact that this parking would be gone during the time of construction. And the answer to that is yes, it is going to be gone. It's a temporary situation. I believe that the staff, the city manager, staff, contractor looked at numerous sites throughout the city. We believe that this site was the best in terms of getting it out of the way in terms of the overall, the use of the facility and what the structures look like. But you have the recycle center, you have a wastewater plant. And so we thought that it was a good area to put the structures from the standpoint of being out of the way, but still being within town to do day-to-day business with the city. So will there be some parking that will be gone? Yes, there will be. When the project's done, that parking's to be brought back and will be available again. But there just wasn't a lot of choices in terms of where to go with a temporary structure. And we thought this handled it as well as it could.
Was the city required at all to, or the applicant required at all to replace that parking that is gone, even though that it's temporary?
No,
You mean somewhere else in town?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
there's no ordinance that requires that.
well, I just wanted to get on the record that there's no requirement.
Thank you.
That was my question too, but you said it's not city parking lot.
well, I mean, it's technically the wastewater facility property, I mean, city, obviously it's city available overflow parking and for the RVs, but at the same time, it is the wastewater facility property.
Although at one point, it was our recycling center.
Bumped up.
And when we chose to revamp the recycling center, that property was made available as a parking lot.
And the city has looked at at existing buildings to move into. Is that correct?
That's correct. I might maybe have Bruce speak to that if you'd like, but there were a number of different sites that were looked at, and we just thought that this was the one that had the least impact, that still allowed for daily business to take place in an area that we felt was easily accessible.
Another site that was looked at is the parking lot, just the other side of the berm over here in the bushes. And we felt that that was it would disrupt more parking towards the center of town. And so that's why it was not chosen.
I think every Tuesday during the farmer's market, I try to imagine having a farmer's market here every day of the year,
Right.
and I mean, it really impacts
Sure.
the Midtown area and the whole flow of traffic, and whereas the other parking, the other site is a lot easier to imagine having less impact.
And this is prime parking here. And just my observation, but the area around the treatment plant is, it's used, especially during season, but it's one of the last places that it gets used.
And Bruce, maybe I imagined it, but didn't we have a discussion about this at council where there was different ideas presented and this seemed like the most feasible of all of them? I mean, I remember that discussion.
Yes, this was agreed on by this council.
Right.
Move forward with it.
So we're looking for approval of the site plan and request for staff to prepare findings of fact for council approval.
Yeah, and what we were hoping for was that instead of having to bring them back, I thought this was a fairly straightforward one that I could draft and have the mayor sign.
Yeah, okay, well, go ahead. I just want to, I mean, I actually, in my mind, goes a step farther. Because I think that you're either going to decide, if you're sitting on a commission like the Design Review Board, you're going to decide to uphold the ordinances as they're written in the city code, or you're not. And to me, this is a blatant decision to just not uphold what our ordinance says. There's nothing in our ordinance that says you have to find alternative parking. And I think that, I think that was presented to the Design Review Board and they just chose to override whatever was written in the code and just do whatever they felt like doing. And I just don't understand that. I don't understand that kind of thinking. I mean, you're either going to do it, do your job or not do your job. And I'm just, I don't know. I find it irresponsible. I do.
Well, I understand the concern for lack of parking or parking and being gone, but you're right. There's nothing in the ordinance that requires them to find other parking. I'm not sure where you'd find it.
Or we wouldn't have a farmer's market.
No, that's true.
Right.
At least for a day. I mean, it's only a day, 4 hours, 8 hours.
Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the site plan for the temporary city hall and police station. Prepare findings of fact that can be approved by the mayor.
I second that.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Jim.
Counselor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Council President McCarthy,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Kerr.
Yes.
Mayor Knopf.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie.
Okay. So next on the agenda, we have a public hearing for 124 West Orford, a right-of-way encroachment. And I'd like to open the public hearing. This is a hearing regarding the application for waiver from requirement to remove an encroachment of private improvement in the public street right-of-ways. Brian and Clara Stone requests for waiver to allow a brick paver parking spot located in the public right-of-way. The property is located at 124 West Orford Street, tax lot 51031 OD, map 5001. This request will be reviewed against the criteria of the municipal code section 1238.060 waiver of requirement. Does any counselor have a conflict of interest? Any counselor have personal bias? Has any council member had any ex parte contacts? Has any counselor made a site visit? Site visit? Okay, is there a staff report?
There is.
Thank you.
Mayor. In the summer of 2023, Brian and Sierra Stone, owners of 124 West Orford, hired Trevor Westover, a contractor, to design and construct landscaping improvements on their property. The property is located on the corner of South Hemlock and West Orford Streets. Landscaping improvements included of the existing grass along with a significant portion of the surrounding vegetation to enable the installation of 2 retaining walls, patio surfaces, surrounding paver walkways, and a new driveway surface. In the fall of 2023, contractor Trevor Westover and his team began construction of this project. As construction progressed, complaints came into the city regarding what appeared to be an encroachment into the city's right-of-way. Public Works checked the city's records to see if the contractor had applied for a right-of-way permit for this project. That's on file. Public Works went to the site to investigate and spoke to the contractor. Property pins were not visible during this visit, and the contractor was asked if he had a copy of a survey to verify property boundaries for this project. The contractor said he had gone by the previous fencing on the property and as their guide for this job. Public Works advised them that it appeared they were encroaching into the city's right-of-way based on the county tax maps on file, and advised him of the city ordinances associated with right-of-way encroachments. The contractor was advised that they should stop working until they could verify property boundaries. In the coming weeks, the contractor continued the work, and Public Works made additional visits to the site with copies of county maps indicating property boundaries, as well as the city ordinance chapter 12.36 under public rights of way and encroachments. Then this information was shared and again discussed with the contractor on site. They were asked to stop the work as they were encroaching into the city's right-of-way with the stone and landscaping materials. The following week, construction continued and Public Works turned the matter over to code enforcement, who also made contact. In the right-of-way waiver application submitted by Attorney Alterman, he references an email between the contractor, Trevor Westover, and the Community Development Director, Steve Sokolowski. In this email, Mr. Westover's inquiry was specific to the work planned on the private property and does not mention any plan or desire to encroach into the city right-of-way, nor does the director imply in the exchange that encroaching into the right-of-way was an available option to him. Therefore, this email exchange does not act as approval for any right-of-way encroachment that now exists. The city has critical infrastructure on both streets adjacent to corner property. There are sewer lines as well as water lines on both South Hemlock and West Orford. The water main on South Hemlock is close and directly next to the newly constructed retaining wall that runs along South Hemlock Street. The challenge this new landscaping provides on both streets is that it becomes an obstruction for public works when an infrastructure failure occurs. Trying to excavate when a retaining wall or any hardscape encroachment is present in the right-of-way can be dangerous and creates liability for all parties. Although the landscaping improvements at the property are attractive and provide nice improvement to the property, the work was done without consideration of the survey records and property boundaries for this property. The appropriate permission and right-of-way permits were not requested as required in chapter 3.12.36.018 and 12.36030 prior to the project start and could have prevented encroachments from occurring. Despite being advised numerous times by several different city officials, the contractor continued the work through project completion. Staff recommends that council deny this waiver application.
Is there any additional correspondence?
There was an email that was forwarded to council on the 21st and materials that were submitted this afternoon by the documents on the document.
Okay. So criteria applicable to this request are in municipal code chapters 12.38.060 waiver requirement. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward criteria described in the staff report or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which you believe to apply to the decision. Is there a presentation by the applicants? Good evening.
Okay, that's different. Okay.
Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Dean Alderman, Alterman. My address is 805 Southwest Broadway, Suite 1580, Portland 97205. I'm here appearing for Brian and Ciara Stone. I believe the Stones are on Zoom and one or the other or both would like to make a short presentation also. You have actually two applications before you here. The first one that the Stones filed, which was under chapter 12.36.030, which was permission to place an encroachment in the right of way. That section has 4 very specific criteria to it. It's something usually decided by Public Works. Public Works told the Stones that they should instead file an application, the one that is in the notice today, under 12.38.060 for a waiver of the requirement to remove encroachments from the public right of way. But there are 2 applications sitting here that have very different criteria. And it's our contention that both sets of criteria apply to this. The reason that both sets of criteria apply is because one of the standards under 12.38.060 is that requiring the applicant to remove the improvement would be a hardship. Hardship is not particularly defined. I'd like to suggest that that ties back to 12.36.060. And a question for you is, would these improvements, if applied for under 12.36.060, qualify? The Stones and I contend that they would qualify for an improvement. One, because they have no adverse effect on public safety. As you will see from the photograph, they in fact widen the street, they improve visibility over what had been there before. You may have noticed that from your own site visits, that there is more room for cars, pedestrians. There is less conflict for cars and pedestrians. There's no effect on drainage, which is the 3rd criterion under there. There is no adverse effect on the public's ability to use the street. And it is attractive, or will be when they finish it, to put the rest of the planting on hold pending this application, will be as attractive as the other yards on the street. So it's clear to me, and I hope to you, that if they had applied for the permit under 12.36.030, the city would very, very likely have granted that permit.
that ties back into the question of a hardship. If the city would have given them a permit to put the improvement, then it is a hardship to make them take it out again, apply, and put it back yet again and build it a second time. It's a very simple and straightforward argument. If you would have approved it, if you would have expected your Public Works Department to approve it, then it's a hardship to make them take it out and get permission to put it back in again. They would like that permission. They would like to improve the street. As you've seen from the materials we submitted, many other houses in the area have fences and other encroachments in the public right of way. That's a characteristic of Cannon Beach. It's a characteristic of the oddities about property lines. In this particular case, as you know from the materials, Orford Street is 60 feet wide. Go out to Orford Street and decide which 60 feet that is going to be. You are going to run into the front yards on one side or the other, or maybe both. You are going to run through the very large hedge that separates the Stones house from the house to the west. You are going to run onto or next to the front porch of the houses on the south side. In the original material that I sent to you had a sketch plan of the area. What it didn't have on it, and the reason I emailed this to you again today, is it didn't have a light green shaded overlay. I'd like to direct your attention to a sketch plan that's in what I sent you, in which you should see two light green boxes, one on the Stones property and one on the two properties south side of the street. If for some reason they don't show up on your printout, I have.
Anybody know where those are in the packet?
Is this what you're referring to?
It's not that one, Councilor Kerr. It's a sketch done on graph paper that shows the Stones house. Yes, that's the one, and that has the boxes on it.
Oh,
It's the page immediately after the end of my letter.
right here. So it's in the packet that was.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the packet.
Those two green boxes.
Page 53 of our packet.
Okay.
In the copy of the packet that got emailed to me, the show up, which is why I've sent it in again. Those two green boxes present where the properties of the Stones and their neighbors on the south side are, if you assume that the north line of the Stones property is the established fence between their house and the house to the north. And if you count 50 feet, which is the width of their lot south, and then you allow 60 feet for the street. If you look at what is not in the green, and yet are significant improvements made by neighbors on the street, you will see what the basic problem is here. There's a 60-foot wide street. The public is using about half of it, and the rest, one way or another, has been incorporated or landscaped or left to go. And the houses that you see are nowhere near setback from the street as far as they would if they were built to current code. This is not unique to Orford Street. It's the case in a lot of other places. Many of you may remember the foofara on Center Street, when it turned out that the top house had slid onto the second lot, the second house had slid onto the third lot, and the third lot had slid into the street. Took 20 years to clean up. This is easy. The staff report has mentioned that there is a water main next to the wall. If you look at the before pictures, if the water main is really next to the wall, then it was underneath landscaping. It was underneath quite a bit more dirt. It was much less accessible than it is today. If anything, the water main is easier to access. The other point about the water main that puzzles me, and I have to admit, I don't know, your water lines are not online anywhere that I can tell. In the photograph that I handed in and that you have just seen, I have circled the two water shutoff valves that are in Orford Street. They are well to the south side of the street, quite a distance away. Now, maybe the water main runs from the shutoff valves north parallel to Hemlock and then west along the wall. But if one or the other of the shutoff valves is the valve that controls the water main in Orford Street, then the water line is far away from this wall. The wall has no effect on the water line. It's somewhere else. There should be a shut-off valve for it, and there isn't. This afternoon, I walked the length of Orford Street looking for other shut-off valves. There aren't any. Those are the only two that are visible. I don't think that is an issue that stands in the way of agreeing that this improvement would have been approved had they applied under 12.36, and therefore it's a hardship under 12.38 to remove it. There is, I think, only one big discrepancy in facts in the submissions that people have made to you, and that is whether widening the street has made it easier for cars to use the street or harder cars to use the street. You have two letters in your packet indicating that the wall blocks visibility or has made it harder for cars and trailers to use the street. But you also have the visual evidence that there is more street than there used to be. It's very, very hard for me to imagine, and I think your staff would have trouble crafting a finding that said widening a street makes it harder for vehicles to use. If you agree with that based on your own site visits, then you may give more weight to the evidence of the people who have testified in the record, who have sent you notes that say the street is now easier to use, it is now safer, there is now more visibility, than to the testimony of people who say that the street is harder to use and that this 2-foot tall wall is blocking people's visibility of the corner. Are there any questions I can answer for you before Mr. and Ms. Stone speak?
I think we would wait until after the public hearing to ask questions.
Yeah.
Right, yep.
Go after the testimony.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Stone, did you want to make some comments?
Yeah, Brian Stone raised his hand.
Okay. Good evening.
Hello, this is Brian Stone. I hope you can hear me.
We can.
Okay, great. I apologize. Was very much intending to be there in person for the original city council meeting on the 6th. But then with the rescheduling tonight, unfortunately, my wife and I were parties to a wedding out of state. So I'm calling you from what I hope to be a stable hotel Wi-Fi signal here. I would like to take a brief moment to commend the city planning department on their own ongoing kind of kind demeanor in dealing with us. And specifically a very special note of thanks to Officer Contier of the Cannon Beach Police Department. He's gone above and beyond a number of times with good communication and follow through. I work with a lot of police officers. He's definitely a good one. I will skip a lot of the personal jargon that I had written, and I'll try to stick to the facts here. Sierra and I love Cannon Beach. I proposed to her on the beach in 2007, and I told her I'd buy our house here someday, and we bought our home in 2018. With that being said, our goal with this project was to make the property more ADA accessible for my cousin Ron. Because when he would come stay with us or he would come visit, with our gravel driveway meeting the gravel road, Ron, also with the road so narrow, Ron didn't have room to park on the road. And often there were 2 cars parked in our driveway. So if he parked behind our cars, he had trouble leaving the gravel road and going onto the gravel driveway and pushing up an elevated gravel path to a yard that sloped downward towards Orford Street. So where we started with this was to do a paver driveway, paver pathway to the back of the home so Ron could get inside with a ramp, and to level out the yard so Ron could hang out with the family outside with us as well. Also for the use of our family and to just improve the neighborhood and hopefully make everything beautiful. We did reach out to the city planning department, and we had requested their permission to move forward with the project. We were never told we needed a survey. So that isn't something we got in retrospect. I think everybody wishes that was the case. But what we did was we did find an old survey pin. And so we actually pushed our lot further out of the right of way than it was prior. We improved sight lines and visibility for both drivers and pedestrians, and I've had a number of neighbors and public commenters walking by let us know that. We are not wanting to create any, sour apples in the community. That certainly was never our goal. And, my hope is that the city council can please look to, protect everyone involved and find a fair and equitable solution. We want to make sure everybody is safe and protected. And at the same time, we never would have moved forward with the project if we didn't reach out for approval to begin with. And, one of the items in your packet that Steve Sokolowski had requested was that we hire an artist and create a sketch showing where we would build the landscaping hardscape and where we would plant things. Of course, we have not put in the hydrangea along the wall or anything yet because the project was stopped. But, our goal here was to follow through with exactly what we showed we would do to the city. And I guess I will leave the rest to Dean because he's a better public speaker than I am. So, thank you.
Thank you. So are there any proponents who wish to speak? Good evening.
Good evening. Ron Kramer. Mailing address 4707 Dubois Drive, Vancouver, Washington, 98661. I was, Mr. Stone, I'm his cousin that was just spoken of in the wheelchair. I'm probably the catalyst for this project to start. Just through conversation of being at the home. I have a home in North Cape, so I'm over quite a bit. It's pretty normal for the family to get together. It was inaccessible for me to get to his home just the way it's built. Those who have been on the site visit, it's kind of elevated. So I actually worked closely with Trevor Westover, the contractor, looking at grades, paver types, having these discussions of taking back the previous landscaping that was approaching the right of way. In doing all this and being a part of this, of course, I'm not a surveyor, but seeing where the property line visually was and where we put it and where we put the wall, I'm guesstimating 7-ish feet back from where it was previously. Mindset, right or wrong, was we're improving everything. This is a win for me being able to park here, anyone else being able to park here, me being able to access the driveway and the home itself, being that we had a paver ramp put up to the back of the house so I could then access the house. All these things were good, done with the best intent. To benefit the property, to benefit the neighborhood, all of those pieces, and never once was there a conversation of we're taking. That wasn't part of it. There was never any talk. We thought we were giving away to increase right of way, to increase parking, to increase safety. This thing escalating and elevating to where it is kind of shocking to me. I'm just a citizen watching this unroll, and the waiver seems like a good, from my vantage point, a great option, assuming that an easement is given, being that no utilities run through Mr. Stone's property. So the wall wouldn't be in any issue to any utilities at all. The only utility that runs is, from my understanding, is his personal sewer, which he's responsible for to the road anyway. I just wanted to kind of touch base and let everybody know that I was the catalyst for this whole thing. I was along for the whole ride, and watching it happen and watching the contractors go. It's obviously been stopped. It does not look like the plan intended. It's going to be beautiful when it's done. We just have to get to a common place where it's a win-win. Right now, the city's winning, in my opinion, because it looks much better than what it did. And now the property is more accessible. In fact, I drove by there yesterday and there were cars parked there, and I know the Stones are out of state. People are using that to park to access the ocean, which before I couldn't park there without being out in the street. So I don't see a downside from, again, just a civilian, but in my perspective might be different than all of yours. But it's been an improvement to the street and to the city. I just wanted to say my piece and let everybody know how we got here.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents? Good evening.
Can I just stand up? Instead of sitting over there?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. I'm
You can
Marcy.
stand on your head if you want. As long as you talk.
I'm Marcy Haig. I'm at 163 Orford and I've been there for 23 years. And before the Stones moved in, the landscaping came way out and it was really tall. It was probably grasses and bushes that were like 9 feet tall. And so the road was much smaller and it was really hard to see if you were turning onto Hemlock or even onto Orford. And with what they've done, and they've pulled back their yard by so much that with this little retaining wall that's there, you can so much more room on the road. And being a small person, I can really see coming in and out of the road when I'm leaving Orford or when I'm turning back into my street. And it's really a joy. Plus, it does have a lot more parking spaces right there because you really couldn't park there safely because of how far into the road all of the previous landscaping was before they built the house and started to do the improvements. So we did write a letter, but it's that openness and the widening of the road that is really support for the road. And it's so wide now that it could be almost too wide, but anyway, it's much more safe and there's more parking. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other proponents? Are there any opponents who wish to speak? Is there a staff response?
I'll reiterate, I don't think anybody argues with the fact that it is a nice improvement. It's very attractive. That's not the issue whatsoever. Mr. Alterman brought up public safety, and I'd just like to disagree with his perspective of that. As council has seen many times, we've had water line failures, especially where we have a pressurized line and any kind of hardscape or objects, whether it's boulders, pavers, whatever it is, it's in the right of way, become a projectile. And they will go whatever direction that force main or water line is blowing out. And so it's liability for the city. It's public safety at risk. Which is one of our reasons why we don't want things in the right of way. Whether vegetation or hardscape is easier or more difficult for us to access our infrastructure is really not the point. They're both obstruction to us trying to get to the infrastructure, but hardscape is especially so when it's a retaining wall. It has footings and things that just paved patio doesn't have. As far as the hardship, I would be very empathetic with this family had I known about accessibility issues in the very beginning. We could have provided some sort of halfway to be able to make access. I think you guys know every year we try to improve on our ADA access. This never came up in any of the conversations. And the retaining walls that we're talking about have no outside access whatsoever. They're solid walls that no one can go through and they're out into the right of way. So whether that helps the access is irrelevant in my opinion. They had ample opportunity from the very beginning of this project. I went out twice, my assistant director went out twice, our code enforcement went out at least once, if not more times, and they had numerous opportunities to pull back and reassess their property boundary lines, and they did not do that. They continued. I even specifically said to the contractor on site that it's much more expensive to correct something when you continue forward than to pause and make sure of where you are. And that was not listened to. So I'm having a hard time finding a halfway point on this that I could advocate to council. You know that I don't approve many of these. The very few times I've been forward to approve them was nothing like this. So that's kind of where staff stands.
How far out into the right of way is it?
They're approximately 17 feet on the Hemlock side, which is the more concerning side. If council recalls, our master plan project includes a haystack waterline loop project that I was given the budget money to do this year that is being engineered as we speak. That intersection is the exact intersection that we are going to take the water line and extend it across 101 up to Haystack Heights. That wall is going to be damaged with that exercise because I have to have a pit there to be able to bore under Highway 101. And so I have to have a starting point for a pit and an ending point where they're going to bore underneath the highway. That is the intersection. And we've already gone out and staked that out and assessed that and given all that to ODOT and the engineering team who is in the process of engineering that project. So this was why this was such a concern to staff, is we knew this was on the drawing board. And as we see that improvement, we're saying we're going to have a problem here. So it's not a minor encroachment of a few feet. You're talking feet into this. So there's no way to avoid that this is going to be damaged during that project.
Did you say 17 feet into the Hemlock right away?
Yes,
And is there a retaining wall on that side?
yes. There's retaining wall on Hemlock and Orford.
Can we be quiet in the audience? Thank you. It's really hard to have a conversation. Thank you.
So, and how far into the right of way, if at all, on Orford itself?
I don't remember how far it is on Orford. If you stand at the corner down at Pacific and look up, there's a power line and a water meter. I gave that as a line of sight to the contractor. I said, this is just a rough guideline that you can go by if you don't have a survey. And because he was going by a prior fence that was on the property. And I said, a fence is not a good guide, but a power line and a water meter is a pretty good rule of thumb. And you can just see how far out it is. And I don't have that measurement. I don't have it with me tonight, so I don't want to speculate, but it's not as bad as Hemlock. I know that.
So it's really the Hemlock one that you're concerned?
I'm concerned about both. We have infrastructure on both streets.
Did the contractor, when you talked to them, did the contractor indicate that they would stop and conduct a survey or contact the owner of the property or anything?
He didn't give me confirmation one way or another. I asked him if he could show me the property pins, had he found the property pins, and he could show me one. And I said, can you show me at least 2 property pins? And he did not have that. And I asked him if he had a survey, and I showed him the plat map, and he did not have a survey.
No, there was a right-of-way permit in the printed packet that we were left, but it
There was, and I wanted to draw your attention to that, that is not a approved right-of-way permit. Up at the top, you'd see a number, and on the subsequent pages, you would see a stamp with either Trevor's signature or mine. And
so it's a non-approved, but was it denied or?
I think it was submitted after the job was complete, as was their gas line permit that was just approved that they submitted after the
This one was dated May 9. Can you kind of fill in that timeline between the different engagements? All we've got in the report is, I think, fall of and spring of.
Yeah, Rusty, I think Trevor's online there, and I can ask him if he ever saw that right-of-way permit. I can't tell if that was actually submitted in the original or if it was submitted after the fact, like the gas permit was. We did not have a permit on record approved for them. So I don't know if Trevor ever saw that or not. Trevor, are you
Can-
online?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so that permit was submitted, I believe, by Dean Alterman when he first submitted his first right-of-way waiver. He submitted that right-of-way permit and he was advised that that was the wrong permit that he needed for this action that he was trying to take. As far as the distance for the right-of-way issues, it's 17 feet on Orford and about 5 to 6 feet on Hemlock. It's the Orford side that, you know, is way over the property lines.
Thank you, Trevor.
So Orford is 17 and Hemlock is about 5?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And what's the infrastructure on the Hemlock side? Is there existing infrastructure?
We have a
Correct.
water line
Yeah.
on both of those.
That is a water main there.
Yeah.
And a water main on Orford that looks more like it's center of the street.
Orford's not a pressurized line. It's just our system's on gravity. And so both of those lines are just gravity water lines.
So still you're concerned about both, but it's really the Hemlock side that
Correct.
you're concerned about the pressurized.
So if you were to make a recommendation, and I'm not sure if you can do this, how much would they have to move the retaining wall to be satisfactory to Public Works?
Back to their property line.
So 5 feet on Hemlock and 17 feet back on Orford.
Correct.
And Karen, they could apply for a variance for ADA accessibility.
Absolutely.
Done that many times. The commission and the council both
Absolutely.
agreed to that, and that is almost, I've never seen one denied.
Right.
It's for ADA accessibility. It has nothing to do with the retaining wall. It has to do with the driveway, making it more
Correct.
accessible for ADAs.
Has to do with
Oh.
surface accessibility.
Right, and they probably would, you know, they'd probably get a variant. I can't speak for that for sure, but I can't imagine them not getting a variance just for that portion. So I don't.
It's very different.
That has,
Less than a retaining wall.
yeah,
So 17 feet on the Orford side, and it looks like there's natural gas was put in out somewhere to that corner, which would be actually in the right of way too.
Correct.
Natural gas for a fire pit, I guess.
Yeah, they have a gas fire.
Do you expect that construction will start there in that intersection?
We were hoping this fall. I don't know until we actually get the finished engineering and get it out to bid, what kind of response we would get. More likely till the spring, but it'd be great if we could start it this winter. It's nothing that would prevent us from working in the winter time.
Any other questions for Karen?
I guess I'm still a little bit unclear about the timeline. And the process. So
The process.
you did get this right of way permit. I mean, again, it's dated May 9. And you would usually either approve or deny at that point,
right permit, he said.
But-
That's what Trevor said.
but the project was finished at that point.
I don't know if the project was finished when that came in. I believe it was, and on there it's noted contract completed or construction completed, I think on the right of way permits. I think it came in after the job was completed. Trevor, go ahead.
Yeah, so that permit, that right-of-way permit, when it was submitted, the project was already done. And that's when we contacted Dean Alterman to say that this was the wrong permit that he needed. And he started the correct permit process at that point. The right-of-way permit, the project was already done.
Yeah, so he, instead of a right of way permit, he needed to apply for a right of way waiver. Encroachment waiver. And so, okay, you're right. Thank you, Trevor, for the reminder. So he had submitted the wrong application. He put the right of way permit through and he needed a right of way waiver instead of a permit.
because it was already done.
It was already done.
And that would be something that, the waiver that you would receive and either,
Well,
deny
I would
or-
prepare a staff report and bring it to you just like this process. All right-of-way waiver encroachments have to come to you guys.
Right, because the right-of-way waiver is saying you already did the work.
Right.
Without the proper permits.
Correct.
Now you want to waiver retroactively for.
Correct.
That's already done.
Now, a permit is something you issue asking permission to do something. And the construction was already done, so it needed to be a waiver saying it's completed. I'm asking to be able to leave it there. So,
And I'm curious, Steve emailed originally to, Trevor Westover says at the bottom paragraph says, also you may want to check the bill, with the building inspection department to verify that there is no need for any permits for the work you are proposing. And then he gives the phone number. Do you know, to your knowledge, did he make any phone calls to the building inspection?
I can't tell you for sure if that happened or not. I know this Trevor Westover called me and he was already at the site when he first started talking to me about doing the improvements and asking me about certain things. The reason why I mentioned the lot coverage is because he told me they knew where the lot lines are and that they were on the property. So I said, based on some of the information that you're telling me, you need to make sure you're meeting the lot coverage requirements of the private property. So our conversation was always related to the improvements taking place on the private property, not in the right of way. I asked him at that time, hey, do you guys have survey pins? Because you're putting your drawings show everything right up to the street. And do you know where that is? And he felt very confident that they did know where that was. So that's why my email referred to the private property and the lot coverage. And like I said, he was already at the site, ready to work and asking me to move forward so I could get the info for, so that they could begin.
So he was ready to work, but he hadn't actually started the work.
I think I don't know for sure, but he was anxiously waiting for some type of idea for him to move forward.
When people do this kind of work, when they're encroaching in a right of way, do people usually get a survey before they do this kind of work?
We strongly recommend it. Oftentimes they don't want to because it's more expensive to know where the line is. Oftentimes, if you're looking at a fence or you don't have, and it's fine to have the survey paper, but if you don't know where the pins are on the site, we're all guessing. And they said they found one in some corner, but he did not have all four of them. So it was something, mentioned that, all right, you better be sure because, you don't want to make a mistake.
And the way to be sure is by getting a survey.
That's correct.
yeah. And typically, it's, surveyors are backed up. And so it's a time thing. People don't want to be hung up and they want to start the job. So they say the cost of a survey, or I'm going to hedge my bets that I know where I'm working, and they move forward. And that's why I always tell people it's more expensive after the fact to fix stuff than it is to be certain up front. So
I don't know how many times we have had this discussion about how surprised people are about how far the right of way goes into their property. I mean, I know I was at one time.
oftentimes there may be an old survey that's on file with the county and people can go by that. But most times people get a more current, especially this home had some improvements done inside. So, I asked the gentleman, he said, they've been doing improvements. I said, then look to see if there's a survey based on that. And because you need to know where these property lines pins are.
Okay, anything else?
So they're 17 feet into Orford.
On Orford. Mm-hmm.
And you feel like they need to pull that back 17 feet towards their property.
I do. There's no benefit for them to be outside their their property lines at this point, and it's only problematic for us, knowing what we have coming down the road.
Did you ever have a discussion with them about the project?
You mean the homeowners
Right, or the contractor that we
or
were,
the contractor? Yeah, numerous times.
no, I mean with the,
The water line extension?
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
okay,
I told them, I said that we're going to be doing a major water line improvement here. And I said, this water line we're going to be working on. So they knew that's why we were concerned.
So if we deny this waiver application, they need to pull it back 17 feet on Orford and the 5 feet on Hemlock.
Yes, and that there needs to be some ADA access as far as just hard surface from the parking right away on to their driveway and into their front walkway. I think that we can do that. That's a very different request than a retaining wall.
okay, does the applicant wish to, an opportunity to rebut anything?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dean Alderman for the Stones again. A couple of very straightforward points to respond. First is that when we are talking about pulling something back 17 feet, it's important to keep in mind that originally the landscaping that had been there that long predated the Stones extended 24, 25 feet into the right of way. I think everybody has agreed on that. That the Stones have opened up a portion of the right of way. They have built a retaining wall that, by the way, it is a dry stone wall. I went out and fiddled with it. 3 or 4 of the top stones can be lifted. The stones underneath are loose. Otherwise, just the top stones are glued. This is not a structural retaining wall of the sort that, let's say, holds properties up along. It's a very, very modest wall, as you've all seen for yourselves. Second, as you've heard from testimony and from, I think, in Mr. Westover's note to you, is that he did go out and find a pin. When you are working on the south side of a property, you don't need to know where the north corners are. You need to know only where the south corners are. And when it is a rectangle, if you find one corner and you know the street is straight, that pretty much tells you where everything else is. The Stones categorically reject that their landscaper acted in any sort of bad faith. He was told to go look, he found a pin. He pulled the landscaping back to behind where he found the pin that appeared to mark the corner. That I think is very straightforward. Now, if hypothetically, if the Stones were going to go replace what is there and make the street narrow again, if that is what the city council wants, I suppose they would have to do it. But under the criteria that you have, they have met the requirements to have this there. I could not tell from the city's presentation whether this pressurized line is a line that is there or is a line that is merely planned to be there. I think that makes a difference in your evaluation. The location as described certainly seems to be inconsistent with where the shutoff valves are that are in the street, and that causes a certain amount of puzzlement. In summary, the Stones tried. I do invite you to read Mr. Westover's statement, which describes a very different and much lower level of contact with the city as this project. When the Stones found out there really was an issue, they stopped construction. They applied for everything that seemed appropriate. And they're now here asking you to let them keep what is there, finish their landscaping project. They understand that if the city needs to run a water line through their wall, they will have to take the wall out and make that space available. That does not bother them at all. They understand that's a responsibility when you have things in the public right of way. I don't know the likelihood of a burst in a water line causing projectiles to erupt. That seems to me to be a very low probability safety event, given the typical depth of water lines. But the city may have a point because there now is less land on top of the water line than there used to be, because they have leveled it out to make it even with the street. Again, they would ask that you grant one or the other of their requests, either the request to put improvements in the public right of way, under 12.36, or the waiver of the requirement to remove them under 12.38. And then in either case, you tie your decision to the criteria that are in your municipal code. Thank you.
I do have a question. You said that they would be willing to move or remove the retaining wall when the city begins its construction project.
Yeah.
But then to replace the retaining wall, would they want to replace it in that same line, or would they be willing to move it back lines that they need to?
It would depend, I think, on where the new line is. And at present day, and I don't know where in the street the new line is intended, whether it's going to be next to I think the power line, I think is the north side, and then the gas line, whether it's going to be closer to the power line or the power line is about 6 or 7 feet south of the wall right now, or whether it's closer to the gas line, which is about 7 or 8 feet south of the power line.
I guess my question is, if they're willing to remove the line, the wall when the city begins its construction project, which could be 6 months, between now and 6 months from now, why can't they remove it sooner than that?
Well, this is the first they knew the city wanted to put a line through what had been their landscaping before they ever built the wall. This is new.
I think the testimony was that they had told the contractor several times that they were going to have a big construction project there.
I think the contractor, whose testimony is in the record before you, states that he talked to Trevor Mount on either one or maybe 2 occasions, but that Mr. Mount was the only person in the city he talked to as the project was going on. You have a flat out discrepancy in the testimonies to the contractor in the city.
Yeah, Karen said she talked at least twice to contractor.
And Mr. Westover says that he did not. Right, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Can I make a point, just a clarifying point about the wall from my understanding? Part of that wall was to retain a tree, the tree that the city wouldn't allow them to cut. So in the middle of that yard, there is a tree that you'll see surrounded by a wall that goes north and south as well as the Orford side of east and west. If that wall comes down, everything will either, if there's no wall, it will slough off and take out more room into Orford again, or the trees coming out as well. So there were other pieces taken into consideration for the landscaping, for the city, for the trees, in trying to do this correctly by the rules established. If the wall is going to come down, then we have to look at what's going to happen to the tree. I just wanted to bring that the wall came back as far as it could to the north to be able to that tree and retain around that tree. So when you look at it, we stopped, or Trevor Westover, the contractor, stopped at the root ball when he met it from the Orford side. So I just wanted that to be kind of in your visual. I don't know. I know there was a few of you that did site visits. That tree's probably centered up in somewhere in the center of the long run of the 50-foot property line.
We can ask that question when we have discussion. Okay.
That was it.
Okay, thank you.
May I make one more comment? I guess I have a question. May I?
Sure.
Come
on up.
Marcy Haig.
Could you please come up? Thank you.
Marcy Haig, live on Orford. I heard several of you ask about the contractor and the communication with the contractor. And I'm not sure the answer to this myself, but I'm wondering about, did anyone at the city ever talk to Ciara and Brian Stone directly on the contract? Because he doesn't own the property, the Stones do. So I would hope that the city would have contacted them directly about the concerns and not just the contractor. Because I would want that as a property owner, because my contractor may tell me one thing, hopefully wouldn't because I've hired him, but I don't know. So nobody's contacted me from the city about a project that I have that would be very disturbing to me, and I would think that that would be a major problem.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I'm gonna close the hearing and move to consideration.
Okay, well, I feel like, how many feet into the right of way it is, how beautiful and pretty the painting wall is, all of these things beg the question, why didn't they get a permit? And why, when some people went out from the city to talk to the contractor, didn't they stop the work and get a survey? I mean, it makes no sense to me. I mean, it has nothing to do with how many feet it is or what it looks like or any of that stuff. What matters is they were told by the city, by Public Works, that they needed to pull back and either, get a permit or a survey or something to make this legal. And right now it isn't. And the justification that it might have been granted if they had asked for a permit, then why even bother ever getting a permit? Why not just have every permit retroactive? Because you might have gotten it if you had applied for it. That's a very odd way of thinking to me. Also, our record is papered with pictures of another street that is probably grandfathered in. If anyone on the street again went to try and do some improvements on their property, they'd be held to the standards of applying for a permit and for getting a survey if there was any question about where the right of way is and if it encroached on Public Works need to be able to access lines. I mean, I'm sorry, and the Stones seem like really nice people, and I'm sorry that this has happened, but I just can't even imagine how, I mean, remember when we had the one on Fifth, the same issue on Fifth, when it was just a couple bushes and it was impeding into the right of way and we had them move their bushes. A simple thing, it's not even hardscape, it's bushes, and we made them do it because they should have done it to begin with. They should have checked, they should have followed the rules. I don't see any reason for not asking these people to follow the same rules we would anybody else. And frankly, if Public Works says there's a problem and that they spoke to the people about the problem, I'm inclined to believe them. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that anybody's a big liar here. I'm just inclined to believe our Public Works staff.
Did you have a question about the tree?
The tree, I have not seen anything about the tree and the root ball in the record, and maybe I missed it.
I saw something about they wanted to cut a tree down. This was the original,
Right,
the beginning.
but I saw nothing about any connection between a retaining wall and it's not here. So it's actually nothing we can consider at this point. And I am a tree lover, but I don't feel like I cannot be considered because that whole issue of the root ball, et cetera, is not part of, and this is a review on the record. So I just, I feel like, I don't care what the neighbors did. I don't care what the people down the street did. Those have been grandfathered in. And if they do the same kind of retrofitting of their landscape, they'll be held to the same standards. I just, I feel bad for the Stones, but I feel like they were given ample warning and 4 times. Why couldn't they just stop and follow the rules? I just don't get it.
Anyone else?
I'm interested in, I kind of wonder why we didn't hear from the contractor.
We don't know what happened between the contractor and the owner. We do not know about the.
I know, but I'm just one, contractor is part of this and then we didn't get any testimony or evidence or anything from contractor, which I think is.
He's acting as the agent for the owners when he is constructing. Wait a minute.
The contractor has.
No.
Excuse me. We've closed the public hearing. Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, Can I make a motion and then there'll be more discussion, or should I wait, or what do you want?
I think we could.
Okay, well, I move to deny the application for waiver from requirement to remove an encroachment of private improvement into public street rights of way located at 124 West Orford Street, tax lot 5001, map ID 5103 IDD.
There's a second.
1DD, sorry.
No one want a second?
I'll second it.
For the discussion.
Under municipal code 12.36.030, the issuance of permits. What is allowed in the right of way? Or do we just want gravel in every right of way or grass?
You're allowed to have vegetation. It needs to be low growing so that it doesn't come up high. Grass can be in the right of way, so people that don't like the dust associated with the gravel can seed it as long as they maintain it.
That's in every situation, whether it affects city infrastructure or not.
Yeah, I mean, fences obviously are problematic. People have proposed removable fences, but we have not, historically, we have not approved that. Landscaping, low growing wildflowers, people put a lot of flowers and, low growing shrubs, salal in the right of way. But anything that has any height beyond 3 feet, we discourage that.
I mean, it says a permit shall be obtained from Public Works Department before planting, removing,
Right.
or otherwise significantly altering
Right.
tree or shrub, or placing or removing any improvement in the right of way. Do we need? I mean, I guess I still don't understand why we even have this option for permitting if we don't allow anything.
Well, typically, when people want to put something in the right of way, whether it's planter boxes or things such as that, they'll get a permit. We evaluate where it is. Like I say, there has been a few instances where we have approved it, where there is no infrastructure. So if they live on a street where, if say they're on a corner and they get their water and sewer from Hemlock, and they want to put something in the Orford right away, and there's no utilities on that street, we'd have no dog in the fight, other than you want your right away for public parking. There wouldn't be an access to infrastructure issue.
But they get
Very rare. That's why we don't approve many of these, because we have infrastructure everywhere, even if it's storm infrastructure that helps us direct water so that people's property doesn't get flooded when we have high rain events. It's just rare.
But the bottom line, Karen, is they get a permit to do.
They have to get a permit.
Yes.
Yeah, they have to get a permit. So
Sounds like we don't. Right, we kind of have rules about what it takes to get a permit, but.
She said if there's no infrastructure, then oftentimes they will. If there is no infrastructure.
It's rare.
Yeah, because there's infrastructure pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I would say we're trying to encourage the private property owners to keep the private property on their properties and not within the city's right of way. So it should be discouraged and be difficult to get, because that right of way is there for parking, infrastructure, street purposes, not for you, I, or anyone else to just go ahead and plant or put structures in the right of way.
Or trees or landscaping.
That's correct, unless the city's putting that in there as part of, street trees or what have you. So oftentimes that's what those areas are. The reason why you have such width, oftentimes you have curb, gutter, sidewalk, maybe a boulevard. So if there was ever the chance that the city wanted to go to the improvement, not saying that that's the case, that's why that extra width is there, is for you to have the other elements other than just strictly the pavement of the street, if you don't.
correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Okay, roll call, please. Jen?
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Kerr,
Yes.
Counselor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Council President McCarthy,
Yes.
Mayor Knopf.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question just for clarification? Is there a time frame on when this needs to be addressed so that we can let the engineering team know and we're prepared when we're trying to put this out to bid, that this has to be dealt with before we can start construction?
What would your recommendation be?
I would say no later than January 1. Like to do it sooner, but I'm trying not to create
Trying to do
crisis for them.
winter or spring?
Yeah.
Are you
Sounds
okay with that?
reasonable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have consideration of the of, our July meetings. Want to have any revisions or anything?
Well, actually, I didn't. I went through them. I didn't, I mean, I didn't look for grammatical errors. I just looked for substance.
Well, we got Nancy for that.
Right.
There were a few.
I move to approve the minutes of the meeting of July 2nd, the work session of July 9th, work session of July 16th, and the July 30th code rewrite meeting.
Second.
Okay. Is this an all in favor? Yeah, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have good of the order. I have a question of the housing meeting tomorrow. Is it 1 to 3 or 1:30 to 3:30?
I believe it's 1 to 3. Let me check on our. email.
Our
And I did mention that.
Yeah, the invite said 1:30 to 3:30.
Did it?
Even though I thought we had changed.
Now Steve left.
So Steve left. We'll get him
It does say 1:30 to 3:30.
on the invite, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's correct. If anybody hears differently, please let us all know.
And unfortunately, I won't be able to attend.
Okay. It'll be really important. Must know. I plan on going. Anybody else gonna go?
Probably Zoom.
By Zoom?
I'm probably Zooming. I can remember.
Anything else for good of the order?
I want to make sure that I'm up to date on meetings. We're not meeting again this week. Is that right? Even though we
At
had,
this point in time, we do not have a meeting scheduled.
okay, so the next meeting is next Tuesday.
Yes.
Okay.
But we do have on hold just in case.
Yeah, I know. That's
Wednesday,
why I asked, because I know,
Thursday. Obviously Wednesdays and now it's too late.
yeah,
For notification.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
we should still keep Thursday
okay,
open just in case.
okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure, because that's what I had and I.
Yes. And then next week, in addition to the 3rd, which is Tuesday, we have a meeting on the 5th, which is Thursday.
Thursday, yeah.
Or we have a public hearing.
And that's Stephanie in.
For Stephanie. And
Okay.
yes.
Okay,
So we're holding Thursday.
Thursday. We can take Wednesday off. Okay,
Except for the housing meeting.
yeah.
And I'm emailing Stephen all the things.
Oh, you are? Okay, you better answer. No.